we hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. I'm your host, Kim Miller-Hershon, and I am delighted to introduce you today to my guest, John Lees from Copay Technologies. And first of all, John, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll move on from there.
Great. First of all, Kim, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. First thing I'm going to do is steal your adjective. I would say that my background is a bit unconventional itself. I come from a PhD in physics as my education, and I am a five-time Ironman, a firefighter, and husband and father, not in necessarily that order. Right after I got my PhD, I left academia and went into management and strategy consulting. So I've been in very large corporate environments and been in healthcare for over 20 years. More recently, I was co-founder of a company called Trella Health that's now 8 years in. And more recently, I have my biggest and I think best and most exciting ambition to date, and that's Copay Technologies, where we're building solutions to bring healthcare pricing transparency across the entire healthcare vertical. Not a short mouthful, nor a small idea, and we're excited to make that happen.
Yeah. Wow. And what an incredible service, right? Yeah. It's so interesting because it's so relevant to me right now. And I don't have a PhD, but I do have two master's degrees, right? I'm not a slouch in terms of my ability to understand things, but I think that it just feels very complicated.
Oh, it is. Unfortunately, it's deliberately, right? Because when things are opaque or inefficient, then organizations can take advantage of them, right? And so then you
Right.
get an incentive to make it more opaque and less efficient. And unfortunately, that's where US healthcare is today. And so one of the things we're hoping to do is take away some of that confusion and help the American people, especially the numerous who are facing the ACA that's now on the table for the subsidies, help them navigate it as best as possible and help them find good quality, lowest cost healthcare.
All right. We are all wishing you a ton of success. Yeah, I own my own business. And so my husband keeps saying that he wants to retire. I'm like, dude, you can't retire because you have the health care. Yeah.
That's true of so many people. It's just the way that things are these days.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting. All right. I'm sure that we will hear more about it, how you built your company as we talk in this conversation. But of course, before we get there, I have a random question for you. If NASA came to you, and you do have a PhD in physics, so this is not out of the realm of possibility here, right? You Ironman, PhD in physics. If NASA chose you to start a colony on Mars, would you go?
How exciting. It's every child's dream, right? Everyone wants to be a spaceman, an astronaut. So, of course, my first instinct is yes. I was the kid who was always taking things apart and rebuilding them. My parents can attest to the fire extinguisher I took apart when I was in preschool and created a ginormous mess. So I was that kid. So, of course, my first instinct is, yeah, and I still like to explore and go hiking in places I've never been hiking and cycle and so forth, and just explore life and do new things. But then, as often happens to me, is that physicist part comes back in my brain and comes forward and reanalyzes it, and I think, why would we go to Mars? I wouldn't go to Mars. Maybe if you said, let's say Europa, where there's actually a fairly decent chance of extraterrestrial life, I would go do that maybe. But my daughters and my wife might not be too happy about that.
I don't know. Maybe you could take them with you.
I don't know if I'd risk them. I'd risk me, but I don't
Oh,
know if I would risk them.
yeah. Oh, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I am much the same. I'm like, I don't know. Actually, I'm probably It's funny because I would say that I'm probably fairly risk adverse, although I'm not sure that other people would say that I'm risk averse. But
Right.
I would
Anyone
say
who starts a company, they can't be totally risk adverse, right?
there you go. Isn't that the truth? That's very true. But I don't see myself going to Mars. I don't have a huge desire to, yeah, to see what that
Right.
experience would be
Yeah,
like.
and circle back to my answer is like, what does humanity get out of being on Mars? And so that's how I also evaluate it. And that's how these days, how I evaluate things I get involved in is how am I helping myself? Am I helping others as well? And
Right.
that's really where I find my motivation when I get out of bed in the morning and take on the day. Or I get that fire call at 2 a.m. in the morning. I know somebody needs my help and I'm going to go do that. And yeah, I might be tired as all get out, but I'm going to help somebody.
I love that. That's an incredible way to think about like criteria. I often say in coaching, you need to have a North Star because otherwise, and you're running a company, if you don't, you say yes to way too many things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so you have a North Star, right? You know what the criteria is, although even those things you can't say yes to all of the opportunities. There,
Of
it has
course.
to be a little bit more than that. But what's interesting, even in starting this podcast, right? Number one, there has to be benefit to the listener,
Right.
right? Can't be about me, can't be about you. Number one has to be, are we providing value? Yeah.
You have to balance that to some extent, right? If anyone was 100% altruistic, they'd be dead in a week, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point. Right. I would say everybody that I coach who is my client, they're pretty far along already in their career. So I don't often meet the people who are so altruistic, they're like adverse to making money. And who does that serve?
Because you can only do that so long unless you have a independent wealthy, but then you're probably also not gung ho enough to make the difference that you can
Right.
make.
And this may be a controversial statement for some people. I have a master's in nonprofit management. So, not that that makes me qualified to have this opinion. I have a commitment to nonprofits. Here, though, is I think the thing that feels really poignant to me. And it is, in my opinion, it is a harsh reality of the way that nonprofits work. You want to have impact. I'm all for volunteerism. And listen, I am the chairman of the board of a nonprofit and I don't get paid for it, right? Like I donate
Right.
my time. But I will tell you, the most impact is go out there and make a ton of money and then put your money where your values are.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
so it's not always just about go out there and make a ton of money so that you can live an extravagant lifestyle. Although I don't have any issues with that. I think you get to make those choices for yourself. I think, though, you also have an obligation to society to give money on the things that are important
Right,
to you.
right. We're all part of society, right? No one, unless you're out in the middle of the woods living off the grid, everyone's part of society. And quite frankly, the people who make those big piles of cash, they made it because they were part of society. And yes, they did great work, something either ingenious or something that everybody needed and everybody bought it. If they were out in that grid, alone in the woods off the grid, then they never would have made that pile.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a really good point, and I think it helps contextualize
Right.
the, yeah. All right. So let's turn to your story and your leadership. So, what's one piece of conventional wisdom you followed early on, only to realize that it really wasn't right for you?
That's a great question. I harken back to right when I started as a junior consultant, right after I got my doctorate. And it was always pretend that you have the answer to, almost like a fake it until you make it type of thing. Like no one wants a junior consultant to stand up in front of the client and say, I don't know. And not that you would ever do that, but you fake the confidence, say, yes, we have that answer and here it is, and make something up. And essentially fake that confidence to give the illusion of being a great general. For me, and what I've learned since then, is that it's really okay to say, not necessarily you don't know, but that we will find the answer. We don't know the answer today, but I have great confidence we will get there. We will find it. We will assemble the
Mhm.
right team or hit on the right external resources or what have you, and we will get there. And that gives that same level of comfort and confidence to the team without essentially lying to them and saying that I am infallible and you should look to me for everything on how to put your socks on.
Yeah, how funny. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So the last, as I'd like to call it, job that I had was as a consultant. And I remember saying to a group, and even though age-wise I wasn't junior, like I was new to the team, so I
Right.
was a junior member. And I remember saying to a group, and honestly, this is what I believe. We were teaching presentation skills, like speech, communication, presentation skills. And I said, listen, and this was like during the selling phase, right? So we'd done the workshop and now we're trying to sell additional services. And I'm like, listen, I believe that all of you, you can do it on your own. It's just going to take you a really long time, right? So if you do it with us, you're going to accelerate your results. And I think it was one of the nails in my coffin to getting fired from that job. And what is interesting about that is the other consultants took me aside afterwards and were just like, how could you say that? And you don't want to tell them that they can do it. You want to tell them that they can't do it and they can only do it with us. And I think, just in the same vein of we'll find the resources to get her done, like, why would you want to work with somebody who you don't think could succeed? I only want to work with people who can get there. Like, you can get there, but it's going to take you a really long time. Like, why don't you get there now instead of later? Right?
Yeah, exactly. An interesting like corollary story to that is that so my last true corporate job, I was brought in for a company of successful. I was coming in to take charge of their operations and IT groups, the big core of the company. And they were really a victim of their own success. High margins, but it stagnated over 20 years because they had no impetus to change. So the CEO brought me in and gave me the big mandate, do what you need to do and turn this team around. Not that they were unsuccessful, again, highly successful. I'm talking
Mhm.
like 65, 70% profit margin, this company. It was something that most companies would dream to have.
Right.
And so I came in and I could have taken a sword and hacked and said, I know because I've done it before and follow me and you're going to survive and you're not going to survive and let the firings begin. But I brought my senior team in and said, I need your input. You're the experts. I am new to this and we are going to change, but you have to be part of that solution. And at the end of the day, not everyone survived, but nearly all did. And those that left primarily self-selected. I just don't like doing this. I don't want to change and so forth. But most of it, we increased our like efficiency by literally 95% in some areas because I brought them along. I gave them training. I talked them through it. And those that wanted to ride the line to success did so,
Mhm.
and those that didn't. But that was my path. Some people are those like dictatorial and can like, I'm going to wipe the team out and start from scratch. But that's not how I personally work. So what works for me is I bring those people together and then let them sort themselves out. And with some help from me, at the end of the
Right.
day, decisions are mine. But that's how my mindset is like, how do the pieces fit together? And primarily, if you turn them around and put them in the right places, that people want to do a good job. You just need to enable them to do.
What that makes me think of is around motivation. And it ties into change as well. But what I think is very interesting, the research that I have read and the thought leadership around motivation is that you can't motivate somebody. Like that's internal. They either have the I want to do this or I don't want to do this, right? Whatever those things are. I think where what I find in my coaching where it gets a little murky is the stories that we tell ourselves about the leaders around us and how they treat us. And it's interesting to help somebody find what is their internal motivation to do a good job because that's their value. And it certainly has to be aligned, right, with the not just the value of the company, but the contribution that they need to make to the goals of the company. But I think if you feel a little beaten down or you don't like your leader's style, right, anything like that, to be able to do your best work because it's who you are and to find the internal motivators within you to figure that out. And John, here's the reality, and you just said this, some people self-select out. If you find it in yourself and you find it just not aligned, then you get to decide that this isn't the right fit for me. And sometimes somebody else
Yeah,
is going to decide that for you.
I think that's very true. Yeah, an example with the same company, a year before I left, they brought in a new CEO, and like his first 6 months, sat in on meetings, didn't really do very much except for what he had to. Did the look and listen and learn thing, right? Which is, I think, good, but I think you need to engage with someone, but regardless. But then at about that 6 month level, that's when he turned in his lock on. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And he came up with a motto for what the company did, and no one could gel with it and no one could buy into it, and it caused a lot of disaffection. And it was just a motto, right? But he
Right.
started like every company meeting with it, and everyone left puzzling their heads like, I don't know what that means for me and my job. And I think that now a lot of the leadership team, obviously myself, as well as a lot of the people who report to me, did that self-selection. It's like, that is not my motivator. That is not what gets me here in the morning and
Right.
makes me feel like I did a great job by the end of the day.
Such a good observation. All right. As a successful leader, what's one thing people assume that you have figured out, but behind the scenes, you still wrestle with it?
Yeah, it comes back around to a similar thing. Is employees, investors, customers all presume that I have all of the answers. And I find myself more often than I would like to admit in an oh blank type moment. And it is scary. But then I look to my past and in my relationships, and we've always gotten to the finish line and we'll continue to do so. It's a little bit scary, and I work hard to avoid that imposter syndrome of the fake confidence, but I have that sort of confidence where I feel like I can parachute into most situations and find my way out. And
Right.
so it's not that I have the answer today or even necessarily have the answer tomorrow, but we'll figure it out. If it's a good question, even we'll first tackle that and then move on. And so it's tough. And I get a little bit of that added pressure, I think, on my shoulders. Is people have this mysticism, for lack of a better word, about the PhD in physics. Oh, he's a know everything all the time. Yeah, if you ask me a physics question, I'm pretty likely to have the answer, but that's my narrow scope. That's where my very deep expertise lies. And as you expand that, it's less deep expertise and situational awareness, where I can look
Mm.
around me, see where we're at, see where problems are, and then help us orient and get us there. And so I get hard questions from our investors, but they're good questions and they're very valid questions. And I need to give them the confidence that they made the right investment without, misleading them. right? And when I get a nugget of knowledge about something that I might have not foreseen and that I hadn't thought about, I said, I really am glad you're on my investment team because now I have that person who's covering my six, who's looking behind me at those weaknesses, because I'll never be as good at my weaknesses as I am in my strengths. And so I'm going to bolster my strengths and hopefully find people to help cover my weaknesses.
I think there's a couple things that I would point out from what you said, which is that it's really important to pick the right investors, right? Especially if you're new at raising capital and somebody wants to give you money, right? I think the initial answer is yes. But I think you point out something really important, which what expertise do I need? Right? What advice do I need? What experience do I need? And frankly, culturally, what's going to be the right fit for me?
That's a very solid point. I have turned down 5 times more investors than I've accepted in. Like people who offered me money and said, I'd love to throw some money at your solution. I believe in what you're doing. But then I delve into it. I was like, can you help me in any way besides just writing me a check? And sometimes the answer is no. And so I will very much thank them for their interest and say, hey, I want to keep you apprised about what we're doing and I'll keep you updated. But I don't think now is the right time for you to engage with us.
And I think that's the advantage of doing this when you're a little bit older, right? Because I think you have business experience and leadership experience. I think it's much clearer around how to sort that out. Not that we always make all the right decisions, but you at least have some criteria.
Training makes for better. When it was in my previous startup with my co-founder, we were a bit fumbling in the dark, learning our way. Now I'm comfortable in the dark and
Mm.
I can find my way out of it. And before I would say we definitely would have failed without the co-founder. Now I feel like I have my feet underneath me. I know how to run a company. And I don't think it's being immodest. I've seen this before. I know what to do when I'm here.
And if I, just like you said, and if I don't know, I have the confidence at least that I'll figure it out.
Or I know who to go talk to. And
That's
if
right.
they don't know, then they'll help me find the person who does. I love
Although,
that along my career, I've had such great mentors and colleagues that I've been able to maintain those relationships. In fact, my COO at Copay was the first person who hired me at the consultancy that I entered right after getting my doctorate. And he took a chance on me, and we've been friends for over 20 years.
yeah, I love that. That's very cool. I think the other piece of this is your ability to ask questions. And I know you tackled it with the sort of fake it till I make it thing, but I actually think it can be quite challenging in that dark zone to ask the hard questions or the questions that feel hard for you. Not even necessarily that you're afraid to let people know that you don't know, but I think sometimes you're afraid of what the answer might be. And first of all, you're not being reactive. That's number one. I think the second thing is the way that I like to think about what you said is you're asking with curiosity. And then I think the second thing when we talk about leadership, which I think is very important to point out here, is that leaders who are so involved in the tactical part of their business never get to the strategy part. They don't have enough. It's not even that they might not think about the why, but they don't have enough headspace to answer the questions.
And that's the dilemma of the startup, right? When you start up, originally you're one, right? And you wear every hat. And so when do you start taking off the hats? And when do you
Right.
hand them off to others? And sometimes it's okay to let things drop because you're prioritizing. You
That's
say,
right.
today I have to make sure the books are aligned and we've reconciled everything. But maybe Next month, it's not as required because not much has changed. And so I'm going to let that be the accountant that's going to take care of that. And I'm not even going to think about it. And or day to day back end IT work. So a large part of our solution is an app that's on iPhones and Androids. Early on, I was very engaged with the development team on how that would function, how to interact. Now I don't even think about it. I have the comfort level. They're managing it. It's functioning. And I don't need to spend my thought cycles on that anymore. So now I'm on the raising capital and our next product and solution.
Yeah.
So anything else that deters from that, I then say, should I be spending my cycles on it? Or do I let that just run on its own for a little bit? Maybe it'll
Right.
fester a little bit. Maybe it's not going
Right.
to be perfect. It's a weed growing in the lawn, so to say. But I know that I'm going to have the biggest impact doing these two things.
That is leadership, my friend.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. So if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you'd throw out and what would you replace it with?
One thing that I've faced is that you have to be so driven in your mission, that's all you do. And that's what I've always heard as is the recipe book for startups.
Hmm.
And that just doesn't work for me. I have lots of different interests, as I mentioned, doing triathlons, being a firefighter, my family. I think when I get a chance to excel in all of those, as well as my startup, I can bring that all together, as well as it brings lots of experiences to bear that also make me successful in business. The previous company that I mentioned that I was with, if if someone in leadership ever found out that you were doing anything else except the
Mm,
job, then it really got demeaned and looked down on. An example, I have a good friend of mine who was president of a BU, and he self-published a short novel and put it out there and was pretty proud of it. And the CEO of the company actively made fun that he wasn't spending enough time
mm,
on running his company. And it became pervasive enough that other people picked up that same theme. And
wow.
when I became a firefighter, when I was working with this company, I didn't tell anybody because then they say, oh, you're not serious about the job. I think everyone's wired a little bit differently. But for me, I have to have these sorts of varied interests that I spend my time on because it's also something that I bring back to Copay. One example that I'll offer is in firefighting, one thing that you're taught is always have a 360. You go into a burning building, you better know everything that's going on around you as well as it's constantly changing and how it's evolving. And so that's something I brought to Copay. I was like, what is the industry happening? What's happening in the industry today? Has it changed? What's the state of our product and services? Do we need to reorient? Do we need to do that? Always understand where you're sitting, what's going on, and what do you need to do different. And it's not you have to be super strategic or super tactical, just be situationally aware.
Right. Wow. I really think that is so interesting. And I think, yeah, just it feels really relevant, right? It does feel really relevant. I had an experience just the other day. I was putting together a final report for a client that just required a lot of just taking a lot of different pieces and putting it together in a cohesive way. And I was sitting at my computer for a long time, just looking at the different things. And it's interesting. And also, too, I was doing it late at night, which is not my best.
Uh, I'm a morning person, so you would never find me doing that.
Yeah, yeah. I was just trying to meet a deadline.
Mhm.
So that's not my usual thing either. But what's very interesting is, and it's funny because I tell people to do this, but I forgot to do it myself. And
Mhm.
I got up to go get some more water and was puttering around for a few minutes. And it was like as soon as I walked away from it and stopped thinking about it, it was like when I got back to my computer, the pieces just started to fall into
Right.
place.
Yeah.
Right?
You were too close to it. right?
That's
You were
right.
too close to it and you had to take a step up, borrowing the term I used before,
That's right.
and let the pieces sort themselves. Because you have, I think most people can say it, they have the ability to find the answer. They just can't get it ahead of themselves
Right.
or blocking themselves from that answer. And it could be fear or it could be some other thing, anxiety about getting that
Right.
prevents people from letting the flow happen for solution creating.
Yeah. And here's the other really interesting thing that happens for me. So I am naturally a big picture thinker, right? So here I am in the weeds.
Right.
I'm trying to put a lot of these sort of pieces together, right? It's very tactical. And that takes a lot of energy from me because I'm not working in my natural state. It doesn't matter if you're a detail thinker, but realistically, the serotonin just gets depleted. And the more sort of onerous it feels to do this, the quicker your energy just drops. So getting up and moving also starts the cycle over again, right? And then your brain cells just work better.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had some of my best ideas sitting on the exercise bike at
Ah, I
5:30
thought
in
you
the
were going to say
morning.
sitting on the toilet. I was like, John, you really want to
No.
go there?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So, what's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your business?
I think often in startups, it's the press on no matter what to be a common struggle with leaders and founders on an initiative or a product. They could be charging at a brick wall. To borrow the term I used a couple minutes ago, what's the 360? What's our current situation? I'll give an example of at Trail Health, when my co-founder and I were building that solution, it was literally just he and I was the fingers to the keyboard and the algorithms and the product building and idea guy. And we built what we thought was this fantastic solution. At the time, hospitals were facing Medicare reimbursement cuts for reimbursement or reimbursements for readmission, right?
Okay.
So your readmissions go up, your reimbursements are going to go down. We said, all right, every hospital in the country is going to want to have our solution because we can tell them decisively, analytically, how to reduce their readmissions, where to send patients to for post-acute care and so on. There was essentially zero interest from hospitals. They love readmissions because 80% of their denials come at the patient intake. So if they have the patient information correctly, their insurance and address and so forth, then they're great to have as a repeat customer. So we completely turned our product idea on its head and said, let's go to the post-acute care side of healthcare and let them find where patients are coming from. So a skilled nursing facility, rehab center is always looking to fill beds. What if we could say, Dr. Jones is referring patients to your competitor, but you have a better average length of stay with better outcomes. Why don't you go to him with this data that we've provided you with? And then, so we just had to turn it all on its head and be very nimble. And with Copay, our initial traction has been a little bit slower than what we'd like. So we're building an additional product and service that we think is going to be huge. But if we were very successful from the outset, we might not have ideated this bigger product that we're bringing to market here. We're going to let patients take a picture of their healthcare bill and we will do an automated AI bill review and say, these charges are inaccurate. You were charged too much. You shouldn't have been charged for this.
Oh,
And
wow.
they'll have that within their palm of their hand, hopefully by the beginning of the year.
Wow. Maybe next year we'll have to talk again and you'll have to tell us how that's going.
Yeah, we're like how we've started, we were very confident, but it could happen that we have to pivot again. It's just that situational awareness and
Right.
not being married to just one thing. We're not a one widget company. I'm not a one widget person, which is why
Right.
this is the type of business that I'm in.
And John, you know what? I will take that back to something that you said. before, which is that you're working to help the consumer, the patient. It doesn't surprise me that you can pivot, right, and think of other ideas. Again, of course, it is related to the business part of it and adoption and all of that. But when you have a connection to a North Star, I think that thinking becomes much, I don't know if it's easy, but it becomes easier than we're just doing this. This is what we do.
You put yourselves in, what are my customers, what are the people's around me pain points? How can I
Right.
help their lives get better? And yeah, of course, we're looking to make a profit as well, but we're willing to accept a profit as long as people find value in what we're
Right.
providing to them.
Love that. All right. Last question. And you did touch on this before, and I'm going to ask you to dig deep on this one. So, about imposter syndrome, right? When self-doubt creeps in, when maybe a lack of confidence creeps in, two points to that. When is it likely to happen for you? For me, whenever I ask that question, I always think about like that. For me, it's in my solar plexus, right? That like,
Yeah, the
either
pit
my
of your
chest,
stomach. Yeah.
yeah, like just that. Even if it's just a moment, right? Yeah. So when is it likely to come up for you? And then what do you do to get yourself back moving forward?
First of all, it can definitely be crippling. And to some, at least to some small extent, I would say there might be something like that almost every day. Again,
Mhm.
passing, I find it happens more often when I get deep down in the weeds and I'm looking, how am I going to make this company? Everybody that's relying on me, my family, my investors, my team is counting on it. And that sort of weight can just be big and overpowering and prevents that, harking back to the term, that higher seat facing.
Right.
We can find an answer, we can do that. And when I face that, I very clearly think on my time training for an Ironman.
Mm,
And at the height of training, it might be 35 hours a week on the bike, in the pool, out running. And then you have race day, which is a 10 plus day of grueling effort. And during the training, during the race, I just know there are going to be times where I say, I hate this. I'm miserable. I want to quit. And it is very real. It is not just yeah, it is. I really would just want to get off the bike right now and have somebody pick me up and take me home. And I'll cry my eyes out. But it's that sort of repeated experience, knowing that it will happen, that allows you to get through it. It might be 5 minutes, it might be 30 minutes, but knowing it's a passing feeling, that there will always be light at the end of the tunnel, prevents you from getting weighed down in it. It's experience. So then it comes back around to, how do you deal with that the first time you face it, right? And I'm a science person at heart and always will be. But despite that science background, the answer to that is what to do the first time. It's just, you got to have pure faith. You have to have faith that you can do it. And maybe that is a bit of that imposter feeling, but you'd say, we can get through this. Even if, let's say, it failed, there is a tomorrow, there is next day, there's the year, right? There will
mhm.
always be that tomorrow and something, no matter what happens today. And then after that, then you have that experience. You can say, this is how I do it. I've done it before. I will do it again. And then you have, back to the science aspect, experience and past data that you
Right.
can lean on. And so, the past doesn't guarantee a future, guarantee the exact future that you want, but there will be a future. There
Right.
is another thing tomorrow. And yeah, you'll always trip. You just got to pick yourself up and know that's not the end of it. And you
Mhm.
just keep going. And I might make it sound a little bit easy, but it's not. And it's really weighing. And it does happen. Like I said, pretty much to some small extent every little day.
Mhm.
But I think having a tiny spark of that is also helpful because you're invested. You know that you really care. You really care about your team, your investors, the consumers who might not even know they need your solution yet, but you really care and you really want to make it be success for everybody involved. And so if you can also have that little bit of realization, that's also, I find, very helpful.
I love that. I was thinking of 1,000 things to say, but honestly, I think that's so profound. I think that's just like the perfect way to end this session. John, thank you so much. Everybody go out and go check out app in
The Google Play Store and the Apple Store, it is out there. We are currently live in New York and soon to be live within the next week or so in LA, in Chicago, and then after that, nationwide.
All right. So definitely check that out. And we'll put the links in the show notes so that you can get there directly. And thank you so much for spending this time. I think you will agree that John really has such a unique experience and perspective, and I'm excited to see where he takes this and where it goes. Stay tuned on that one. And this is Kim Miller-Hershon, coaching and consulting, doing unconventional wisdom about conventional wisdom, where cliches come to retire and fresh thinking we inspire. And go out there, share this episode with people who you think need to hear it. And we'll see you next time. Go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come to